Good evening. This is the September 2023 meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, Vice Chair of the CAC. I'll preside this evening since Chair Ortiz cannot attend tonight. Before I give the chair's report, I'd like to ask Elijah Saunders, our clerk this evening, to do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then he will read an announcement about public comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Siegel. Member Bars.
Bars present.
Bars present. Member Chen. Chen absent. Member Daniels.
Daniels present.
Daniels present. Member Davidson. Davidson absent. Member Ford.
Ford present.
Ford present. Member Kim. Kim absent. Member Levine. Levine here. Levine present. Member Ortega.
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Member Chair Ortiz. Ortiz absent. And Vice Chair Siegel.
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Vice Chair, we have quorum now for the public comment announcement. Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item, when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again, or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you, clerk. That brings us to item 2, which is the chair's report. First, I encourage CAC members and folks listening in to read the executive director's report presented yesterday at the Transportation Authority full board meeting. It is available on the agency's website at www.sfcta.org. There are a lot of short, informative updates about project delivery and other efforts the agency is working on, along with upcoming outreach opportunities, one of which I will highlight. The Transportation Authority is leading the Bayview Caltrain Station location study to identify and advance a single preferred location from the remaining options at Evans Avenue and Oakdale Avenue to restore Caltrain service to the Bayview and surrounding neighborhoods that has been missing since the closure of the Paul Avenue station in 2005. Staff has been advancing initial work on the study, including developing a set of decision factors and preliminary station design elements, and are seeking the community's input on both. The study team will be hosting a community outreach event at the Bayview Hunters Point YMCA at 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, October 14th. Additional information, including an online version of the content and feedback form, can be found on the project's website at www.sfcta.org/Bayview-Caltrain. Also, at yesterday's board meeting, SFCTA provided an update on progress on its quick build program, similar to what the CAC heard in July. SFCTA staff indicated that they anticipated seeking allocation of about $5 to $6 million in Transportation Authority funds to implement improvements from their quick build toolbox to the remaining 50 miles of high injury network that have yet to receive safety improvements. The toolkit includes enhancements such as crosswalk upgrades, painted safety zones, longer walk times, and turn calming, and should be completed by December 2024. And some very exciting news for Vision Zero. On September 13th, the legislature approved Assembly Bill 645, which would authorize the implementation of 5-year speed safety pilot program in 6 California cities, including San Francisco. AB 645 would enable the cities to install a limited number of speed cameras, technology that has saved thousands of lives in the cities and states that have implemented it, but to date has remained illegal in California. Governor Newsom now has until October 14 to sign it, veto it, or let it become law. We understand that at its October 3rd meeting, the SFCTA board will hear an update on Vision Zero including implementation plans for AB 645 if it becomes law, and on multiple turn lanes. Last but not least, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Phoebe Ford, our new District 4 representative. Member Ford, would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself to the CAC?
Good evening. CAC.
Pull the mic super close.
Okay, super close.
You can drag it
You can
towards
pull
you.
the
There you go.
Okay, good evening to everyone on the CAC. I'm Phoebe Ford. I live in the Sunset, part of District 4. And I joined this committee on the recommendation of several of my friends and neighbors that I know through cycling community. I'm a family biker. But I'm very interested in transportation and public transit. My professional work is in logistics and e-commerce fulfillment. So networks and how people get around is something I'm always interested in.
Well, welcome.
Great, welcome Member Ford. Lastly, a couple of meeting management notes. CAC members, if you would like to speak, you can indicate so by standing your name card on its end so that it's pointing up like this. I ask CAC members to wait until I call on you to speak. Then press the red star sticker on the base of the microphone to turn it on. You should see a red light turn on below the mouthpiece. Please turn off the microphone when done speaking by pressing the red star again. Be sure to directly speak into the microphone so folks in the back of the room can hear you. Please limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. Presenters, please only respond to questions if requested by the chair. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Seeing none, is there anyone in the room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Don't see any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
There is no public comment for this item.
Thank you. That puts us on the consent agenda. Items 3 through 5 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present on these items. If a CAC member wishes, any of these items may be removed and considered separately. Looks like Member Levine, do you have a comment or question on the consent agenda?
Yes, I just have a question on it's on the legislative agenda, and I just had a question on the last item, which is the vehicle is bicycles on sidewalks, AB 825. Just curious, I know the SFCTA has opposed it unless amended, and I would like to know what kinds of amendments is the SFCTA looking for? Thank you.
Right, thank you. So this bill is actually, it was enrolled, so it's on the governor's desk right now. The amendments that we had hoped to seek would allow jurisdictions to maintain their ability in certain situations to prohibit bicycle riding on sidewalks. I think we're a different type of environment than a lot of places across the state, and so I think we wanted to have the ability to recognize that and to establish regulations that meet those needs. The bill was amended after we took this position to be more permissive of exceptions to riding on sidewalks, but it still ultimately does make it legal except in certain situations that wouldn't be able to apply citywide. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you very much.
No problem.
Great, thank you. Do any other CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Leave the room wishing to give public comment on the consent agenda. Looks like we have a public comment.
Edward Mason, regarding the bicycles on sidewalk, I'm totally opposed to bicycles on sidewalks based on my experience in the city here. Between all the micro mobility of, I almost got run over by a skateboard yesterday. It just shows the total lack of regard that people that are on the micro mobility devices have for people and their surroundings. And I am totally opposed to even bicycles, micro mobility, whether they be scooters and all. They are just totally unacceptable on the sidewalk. Sidewalks are for pedestrians, and I am totally opposed to this legislation allowing bicycles on sidewalks, because then you're going to have you'll have all the other micro mobility on the sidewalk allowed. And this is unacceptable from a safety standpoint and from my experience in the city here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any remote public comment?
Checking for remote public comment. And there is no remote public comment for this item.
Great, thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 3 on the consent agenda, which is the minutes?
Move to approve item 3 consent agenda.
For a second.
Great, moved by member Levine and seconded by Bars, excuse me. Mr. Clerk, would you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, Vice Chair, Member Bars.
Bars aye.
Bars aye. Member Daniels.
Daniels aye.
Daniels aye. Member Ford.
Ford aye.
Ford aye. Member Kim. Kim aye. Kim aye. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega aye.
Ortega aye. And Vice Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel aye. We have 7 ayes. The minutes are approved.
Great, that puts us on item 6, which is to adopt a motion of support to adopt 8 2023 Prop L 5-year prioritization programs and amend the Prop L strategic plan baseline. This is an action item. And Hannah LaForte and Amelia Wally, program analysts, are here to present this item.
Okay. Good evening, CAC members. My name is Amelia Wally, program analyst here at the Transportation Authority, and I'm very excited to present to you tonight our second round of 5 YPPs. So I won't go super in depth on these slides, as you've seen them before, but just a reminder, the expenditure plan requires development and board approval of 5-year prioritization programs, or 5 YPPs, as a prerequisite to allocating funds, as well as an adoption of the Prop L's strategic plan. So the board approved 4 5 YPPs back in July, and tonight we have the next 8 for you, which gets us to about halfway through the 28 programs. This diagram shows the iterative process that we go through every 5 years. We are now in step 2 and working with sponsors to identify the specific projects to fund in the next 5 years. So in addition to the project list, the 5 YPPs include several other sections, which are outlined here. The 5 YPPs are included as enclosures to this item, and these sections are detailed in our memo to the board in June. An important part of the 5 YPPs is the guidance on how to select projects, which we use prioritization criteria for. The expenditure plan required some criteria for every 5 YPP, such as the relative level of need or urgency, which is tied to meeting timely use of fund requirements. But there are program-specific criteria as well, such as safety, which has a tailored definition for each program. We've used most of these criteria before, but our expenditure plan advisory committee provided specific feedback on the 3rd and 4th Prop LY criteria listed here, reflecting the importance of community support and equity considerations to the committee. We did conduct a series of public engagement efforts to help inform the development of the 5 YPPs, and that built on extensive community engagement from the expenditure plan development and the San Francisco Transportation Plan and Connect SF efforts. We will publish a report with our findings by the end of October, and we've been pulling from outreach in the meantime as we work with sponsors to develop these 5 YPPs. So with that, let's jump right into our 5 YPPs that we're recommending for approval tonight. First up, we have the BART Core Capacity Program, which is one of the major transit projects in the Prop L expenditure plan. The BART Core Capacity Program is a $4.4 billion program intended to relieve crowding, increase ridership, and decrease greenhouse gas emissions. There are 4 main elements to the program. That's new communications-based train control, additional rail car storage, additional traction power substations, and 306 additional fleet of the future rail cars. Prop L funds are requested to support the purchase of 54 of those new rail cars, and we advanced $35 million in the baseline to allow BART to exercise that contract option, which was time sensitive. Alameda County Transportation Commission is contributing a like amount of funds this period for that procurement contract option, and Contra Costa County CA is considering a $100 million commitment in a future sales tax ballot measure. FTA has just completed a risk review of the program, and BART is considering updates to the cost and funding to address the risk review. They'll be providing periodic updates to the board, and we expect to bring an allocation request for your review next month. Next up, we have another BART program. That's the BART Maintenance Program. BART's highest priority system-wide project is to replace all of the 700 or so fare gates in the system, which have reached the end of their useful life. System-wide, the project cost about $90 million, and we are recommending for this 5 YPP to provide $12.5 million to update the gates at all 8 of the San Francisco stations. The project has secured significant funding from federal FTA and BART Measure and Capital Funds to leverage Prop L funds, and BART has executed a contract with a vendor. They're ready to begin installation with a prototype in West Oakland by year's end. There's some benefits listed on the slide. But I'll note that BART staff indicates that the gates have a lot of improved design features for the customer, including being able to sense if you have a stroller or luggage when walking through, as one example. And there is a concurrent allocation request for this. My colleague Mike will be addressing in the next item. Next up, we have Caltrain maintenance. We did advance funds for this program beyond the pay-go amounts in the baseline to $5 million a year, in order to support Caltrain budgeting and corresponding commitments from funding partners in the 3 member counties. I want to note per project leveraging looks low, but the Prop L contributions are to the overall capital maintenance program and are significantly leveraged by the member county contributions as well as federal transit formula funds. So we expect program-wide leveraging to be in line with the expenditure plan. Next up, we have ferry maintenance. This is a relatively small program. There's one project that we're recommending programming funding for the port, $473,000 to replace and retrofit the floating passenger loading deck at Ferry Gate B. That's the full 5-year pay-go amount, but it does not require advancement of funds, and leveraging is good at 45% for this single project. Moving on now to Bayview Caltrain Station 5 YPP. We have 2 projects in this program. Prop L is being used for the early project development phases to develop scopes and to make them more competitive for discretionary funds for future phases. Both projects we expect will extensively leverage non-Prop L funds in future phases. The first of these 2 projects is the Quint Gerald Connector Road. It's a Prop K legacy project, and we are recommending programming the full $4.73 million in legacy funds for right-of-way and design. That project has been stalled due to negotiations for right-of-way. So the need to advance these funds here is driven by that need to be ready to acquire the right-of-way in order to leverage non-Prop funding sources and avoid further cost escalation. And then the second project in this program is the Bayview Caltrain Station. We're recommending $3.8 million design. The Transportation Authority has been leading a study seeking more clarity from the community and stakeholders about the preferred location for a new station to serve the Bayview. The two options are shown on the map there. We expect to wrap this study up soon, and we're recommending advancing funds here to keep momentum for the next phases of work on the station. Okay, on to curb ramps now. Curb ramps is an annual program carried out by Public Works. It was one that we funded in Prop K, and in recent years, Prop K was contributing around $1 million a year. So we are recommending advancement of funds in this first 5YPP in order to stay consistent with the Prop K funding levels, and we expect advancing the next period to be pretty minimal. There are locations for curb ramps all over the city. There's a significant backlog that Public Works is working to address. Leveraging for fiscal year 24 is very strong, and leveraging in future years will be reevaluated at the time of allocation when general fund contribution amounts are known. Tree planting, quite similar to curb ramps in that it's an annual program, also was funded by Prop K, and we are also recommending advancing funds in order to keep consistent funding levels with Prop K. Leveraging is good. Public Works was recently awarded $12 million in Federal Inflation Reduction Act funds. Priority locations for fiscal year 24 are focused on equity priority communities like Bayview, Hunters Point, Western Addition, Tenderloin, and Soma. There is a concurrent allocation request that will be presented as part of the next item. And finally, we have our Vision Zero Ramps 5YPP. This program has several important projects to improve safety around freeway touchdown points around the city. The first is a local match for a federal grant to complete the study of freeway on and off ramps in the city. We've covered the locations in Soma in a prior phase, but phase 3 will study locations in the southeast and the western areas of the city, and will incorporate efforts already in progress, such as the I-280 projects, also in this 5YPP. And we are presenting a concurrent allocation request for this project so that we can finalize the grant agreement. And the 5YPP also includes a placeholder for follow-up implementation efforts that may arise from this study or other planning efforts. We're also recommending programming for improvements to 13th Street that SFMTA will carry out. Those are recommendations from phase 2 and include a number of bike and street safety improvements. And then 2 I-280 projects, the first being the northbound Geneva off-ramp for signal work in coordination with Caltrans to improve traffic circulation and safety. And the second is the I-280 off-ramp at Ocean Avenue, a request for design to realign that off-ramp to improve safety for people walking and biking. Anticipated leveraging is very good at 94% compared to the 70% that was expected in the expenditure plan. And it does require advancing funds as well. So that is the overview of the 8 5YPPs. I know that was a lot. So we're recommending those 8 5YPPs for approval tonight. And in addition, we're recommending to amend the strategic plan baseline just to incorporate the recommendations within those 5 YPPs, 5 of which, as you heard, are requesting advancement of funds over the pay-go amounts in the baseline. The advancement of these funds results in a small increase in debt costs, around 4.7%. We have to be thoughtful about which programs we recommend advancing funds for and make sure that we're paying close attention to which projects are ready, looking at aspects such as full funding plans, good leveraging, capacity to deliver, and we've been doing all of that in this process. So looking ahead, we'll bring these 8 5YPPs and strategic plan baseline amendment to the board in October for approval. And then we'll be back in October to you in November to the board to bring a third round of 5 YPPs. And that will include the biggest Prop L program, community maintenance, as well as safer and complete streets, among others. And finally, we hope to bring the last of the 5 YPPs and the final 2023 Prop L strategic plan to the CAC and the board in early 2024. So with that, thank you for your attention. I can answer any questions, or we also have project managers from BART, Caltrain, Public Works, MTA available to answer questions as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Looks like we have a couple of comments or questions from members. Member Levine, I saw your Dr. Go.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It was really good and very clear. Just have a couple of quick questions. One is on bar capacity, talking about the vehicle procurements. What is the total cost of the vehicles that are going to be purchased eventually?
I'm gonna have Priya come up and answer this question.
Hi, good evening, Priya Mathur-Bart, Director of Funding Strategy. Thank you for your question. So for this program, the Core Capacity Program, as Amelia mentioned, it's 4 components, including rail cars.
Right.
The rail car procurement is for a total of 306 rail cars, and that costs $1.1 billion.
$1.1 billion,
Yeah.
and the Prop L leveraging amount.
And the Prop L is a little over $35 million.
and that would go totally to the leveraging the vehicle purchase.
Correct,
Oh,
correct.
okay, great. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Just one other very
Okay,
quick
remember
question.
the name? Can you speak, turn your mic back on?
Oh,
There you go.
sorry. One other very quick question. It's on a different subject, so thank you. It has to do with the curb ramps. And I just wanted to, when the item came up, I remember Mr. Mason had some very stern comments about potential problems with cracking of the curb ramps at a number of places. And ever since he made those comments, I've been looking. I haven't found any myself, but I'm just wondering, is this project going to have the same contractor? And if so, has that contractor been aware of the problem with cracking at the curb ramps?
I would invite Victoria or the project manager from Public Works to answer the question here.
Amelia, I'll defer to the project manager, Edmund Lee, on this. Seems like a technical question.
Hi, good evening. This is Edmund Lee, project manager of Public Works. So our contracts, we typically put those out to bid. So it does go through the advertisement low bid system. So our contractor isn't currently known. Having said that, there are sort of the same usual contractors that typically bid on our projects. We're not specifically aware of any particular locations or any poor quality or craftsmanship. If there's any specific examples, I'm willing to take that back and take a look at the previous contractors who perform work on our contracts and make note of that. But as I mentioned, this is something that our projects we put out to advertise and use the low bid system.
Thank you. I expect Mr. Mason will have some more comments when public comment is available on this item.
Great, member Bars.
Thank you, Acting Chair Siegel. I have a few questions, 2 about the items before us and 1 about the 5YPP process. So about the Fair Gates project. It looks like the entire price tag to replace all 715 Fair Gates is about $90 million. Could you just benchmark that for me against investments in Fairgate technology in other regions? Like, how does that compare?
That's Priya Mathur-Bart. It's a great question. I'm afraid I don't have an answer for you on that. We can come back to you with additional information if you'd like.
Yeah, I would really appreciate it. Thank you. And then second question on the Vision Zero ramps. I'd like to know how much we've spent on Prop K and now Prop L on the safety of where freeway ramps touch down in the city. Is there an estimate for how much we've spent on Vision Zero ramps and similar projects? Rachel Hyatt, would you like to take that question?
Sure, although I think, Sarah, is your question about capital expenditures or planning or both?
You know what? I was about capital, but I'll take both if I can get both. I'm looking for a rough order.
I do apologize because am not prepared with the capital expenditure answer. So that is something I'll need to get back to you on, or it's possible that my colleagues in PPD have more information on that from our previous Prop K investments. For planning, we have conducted 3 Vision Zero ramps. Now these are studies in sort of the memory that I have, and these are studies that the SFCTA has led. They have been in the past primarily Caltrans grant funded with a Prop K at that time match. And those studies were on the order of magnitude of, a $400,000, dollar studies. We're talking about, the first one being 10 plus years ago. And then there was another, I think in the late 2010s. So that would be the sort of study level of effort. This study that's being proposed for programming here is primarily funded by a federal Safe Streets for All grant with the Prop L match. And the total, actually, Mike will be presenting sort of the total study budget and how that breaks down. But it ends up being a $600,000 in the range effort. For the study, what that gets us to, though, is the conceptual design and cost estimates to make the actual capital improvement grant ready for the next, for implementation, which then we hand over to SFMTA. And I know that we do have information that we can follow back up with you on regarding the delivery status of the previous SOMA Vision Zero ramps project. So I hope that's helpful. And with the capital, I do apologize that I don't have the capital figure.
Thanks, Rachel. If I could add, Anna Lafort, the cost of recommendations that came out of the first 2 phases of the study was something around $4 million. Because these are mostly low cost, ready to implement recommendations. That is one of the keys that we're trying to do. And so, for example, 13th Street, which is one of the recommendations to actually fund in this 5YPP. This is a recommendation that came from one of our prior studies. What we're recommending to program is the last dollars in on that project. And so it's been a very productive process of having SFCTA working on these studies that have the interface of the state facility and the local facility, and coming up with recommendations with MTA, like what we do for the neighborhood program, and planning studies in general, so that the projects are ready to implement when the studies are complete, especially with the safety aspect and time working against us.
Okay, yes, thank you. I appreciate both of those answers, and that is very helpful. And I don't really have concerns about the process. It's really more about just the total cost that I'm interested in understanding, is how much we've put into like these improvements to the freeway touchdown ramps. So is it possible to get that follow up? Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, and then my third question, which might actually be to you, Anna Lafort. So if this is round two. We already did round one. This is round two. Round three is the last round of projects. No, four. There's 4 rounds and there's 4. Should we anticipate funding for the active communities plan coming in one of the subsequent rounds? And also, is there a like cost to coming in a later round? Like if the project is being in round one, is being funded in round 1 or round 2, does that reduce the amount of dollars available for rounds 3 or 4?
The active communities plan implementation funding is included in the Safer and Complete Streets 5YPP, which is slated for CAC consideration in October. So you'll see that soon. And no, there is not an impact between the programs. Programs need to be able to cover their programming and financing costs if they are seeking to advance funds within, and so that program will be bearing its proportional share of costs. So no.
Great, thank you.
If I may, real quick, through the chair, just to clarify on the active communities plan, we'll be bringing through a placeholder because the plan won't be done. And so when it's done and there's an implementation plan with prioritized projects, we'll bring that back to the CAC. So it goes in.
Great, thank you. Member Ortega?
Hi, yes, I just wanted to also thank you for the presentation and just second Member Bars's request on the BART tailgates. I'd also just be curious in understanding an ROI or a return on investment for those gates, because I know it's been widely reported that fare skipping is a huge problem for BART in trying to recoup its revenue, and as it faces the fiscal cliff, it's kind of expensive when you look at those numbers. And I'm just curious if there's an anticipated ROI on the project, or hope maybe.
Hi again, Priya Mothers, Bart. Thank you for that question. I don't know that we have an expected ROI. We have, been looking at fare evasion. It's not entirely clear how many people who fare evade would otherwise be paying customers, but we do have a plan to measure fare evasion pre and post so we can compare the performance of the fare gates.
Could we see that when it's done?
Yeah, I'm sure we can come back with a report on that. Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks.
My pleasure.
Great. I have one question related to the freeway ramps. I'm really glad to see that this is something that's been studied in various rounds and is continuing to be studied. And I'm also excited to see the funding for the recommended 13th Street improvements. I am pretty concerned about the freeway interfaces in the city. I'm aware of 3 fatalities, I think, just since mid-August, that were either at a freeway on-ramp or within a block. So this definitely is something that I'm glad to see us prioritizing. I was wondering if there were any recommended improvements from the previous rounds of study of freeway on-ramps that were recommended for all of the ramps that might be applied more quickly to all the places where the freeway touches down in the city, that could potentially use Propel funds. Or yeah, have we learned anything at this point that could be applied more quickly to all the freeway on-ramps?
Yes, we have. It's the MTA's Quick Build Toolkit. And so with the Vision Zero ramp, the very first thing we're doing is recommending and identifying what can be done right away with the Quick Build Toolkit. And we also will have the capacity with this grant to identify beyond Quick Build treatment. So there'll be both levels to this work.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions from members. Do we have any public comment in the room on item 6?
Edward Mason, regarding the concrete cracking, I've documented that on 23rd Street between Church and Castro. They were all had cracks in it. I will be more than happy to provide additional observations on that. Regarding street trees, street trees are part of the Better Streets program by the federal government, and that's why it comes out of transportation money. But I argued at the expenditure committee meetings that the street tree money should come out of the city budget, just as maintenance is under Proposition E. Because it gets too diffused as to what is the exact cost of the urban forest in San Francisco. You have to go and try to pick around and find out where all the money's coming from. There should be one account that represents the funding for planting the trees and also maintaining the trees. And I'm just really disappointed that we're using transportation money for a street tree planting, but it is what it is, and not much I can do about it except just go off in a corner and grumble about it. So that will conclude my comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Not seeing any more public comment in the room. Operator, is there any remote public comment on item 6?
Checking for remote public comments. And there is no remote public comment for item 6.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 6?
Yeah, Member Kim motions.
Member Ortega seconds.
Great, moved by member Kim and seconded by member Ortega. Mr. Clerk, would you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, Vice Chair. We could take this same house and call without objection if it pleases the Vice Chair.
Without objection? Yeah. Great.
All right, the motion is approved.
Awesome. Okay, that puts us on item 7, which is to adopt a motion of support to allocate $13,724,000 and appropriate $651,000 in Prop L funds with conditions for 5 requests. And this is an action item. Let's see. Okay, member Chen isn't here, so we have Mike Pickford, Principal Transportation Planner, here to present this item.
Good evening. So I think, yeah, you should probably be able to see my slides now.
Mike.
Thank you for addressing my name. Great. Yeah, so here are my slides, and there will be a lot of repetition with in this presentation, because some of these, 3 of these requests are coming straight out of the 5 YPPs, which were the previous item. So let's see if we can get the next one. So you have already heard about the Fairgates project. Amelia kind of glossed over some of the benefits, but we do want to emphasize that installing the new Fairgates would increase reliability, access, improve the ridership experience, and reduce maintenance costs. So that does factor into the ROI as well. And then just again emphasizing that for the San Francisco portion of the project, BART is matching the $12+ million in Prop L, dollar for dollar with other funds, and that $90 million project will replace all the Fairgates cross level system. BART is starting with a prototype in West Oakland in December, and they expect to be finished with the full system by December 2026. And with this investment from San Francisco, the San Francisco Fairgates would be constructed early in the overall project schedule. So you also heard about tree planting. Public Works looked at the 2016 tree census to identify priority planting sites, and they expect to prioritize locations in districts 5, 6, and 10. There is a list and map of priority locations in the packet. And then, of course, once planted, the trees would receive lifetime maintenance care through the city's general fund. Once they've gone through this process of being planted and established for 3 years using these Provel funds. And then the third of the requests, which you have already heard about, Vision Zero ramps. So these funds would be split between the Transportation Authority and SFMTA. And they will provide the local match for a federal Safe Streets for All grant. Again, this is building up the success of the first 2 studies, which did focus on the Soma area. So this is expanding locations into the western and southern parts of the city. And there's a lot of overlap with locations on or near the high injury network and in equity priority communities. The project team will also come back and update the CAC on the project prior to the board adoption of the report in June 2025. Right. So on to some fresh material. The last 2 projects are proposals from the Transportation Authority's Neighborhood Transportation Program. The first request would allocate a total of $350,000 to Transportation Authority and SFMTA for the Inner Sunset Multimodal Safety and Access Study. This study would identify a prioritized list of recommendations to improve multimodal traffic safety and access in the Inner Sunset Commercial Core in District 7. The anticipated 5 to 6 top recommendations are expected to fall within 3 types: low complexity safety or access improvements, conceptual designs, and then bigger, longer term, bold concept screening. SFMTA will lead development of pedestrian, bicycle, and transit improvements within the study area, and outreach will include Chinese language translation. The report is expected to be presented to the board for approval in November 2024. And their final request is also a neighborhood program project. This would be $350,000 between the Transportation Authority and SFMTA again to study various scenarios for a People First Walter U. Lum Place, which is a street adjacent to Portsmouth Square in Chinatown. Potential options include a shared street, traffic calm street, or time restricting vehicle access to the street. The study would also develop urban design concepts to connect Walter U. Lum to other cultural destinations within Chinatown. The project includes two rounds of public and stakeholder outreach, which will, of course, include Chinese language translation. And the report is anticipated to be presented to the board in June 2025. With that, I can take any questions, and again, we have project managers available.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Do we have any comments or questions from members on item 7? Member Ford?
Okay, just in case I missed it, can you confirm the Inner Sunset study is also 2025 for the results?
We're expecting that to be completed at the end of 2024.
Oh, 2024. And I'm new here, so apologies if I don't understand the procedures. Is there a path where we could just skip to the 5 recommendations and talk about those?
I will
without the study.
I will invite my colleague Rachel Hyatt to talk about how we plan to arrive at those recommendations. Ooh, looks like she's on mute.
Oh,
Hey, Rachel, you're muted.
is that better?
Yes.
Okay, yes, thank you for the question. So this study is a request for the Neighborhood Transportation Program, which means that it is a request of the District 7 supervisor in this case. So the supervisor whose district this location is in. And so the office has asked us to do outreach. They would like outreach done and a conceptual development process conducted. I think especially for the bolder, more maybe more transformational changes that they would like the community to consider. I think we have talked with MTA about, applying the quick build toolkit to those places where it hasn't been already. There is some work in the area currently on Lincoln Way that is quick build, for instance, but at this time there aren't quick build improvements underway in the segment of Irving that I know the commissioner is interested in having a community conversation about. So what we want to do with the process, and we do want to keep this to, and I know it's important to the commissioner to keep this to a less than a year process at the most, which is why we're recommending an approach that brings this back to the board within a year to get engagement on and sort of community buy-in on not just quick build improvements for the segment of Irving there between 7th and 9th, but potentially more transformative changes as well they're interested in. And, community outreach, I would say, is it's a really essential part of our process as well as MTA's process. I know our board and the requesting commissioner is looking for us to conduct community outreach as part of this. It's something that they would like to see and something that, we do in any study as part of our engagement process. And we want to make sure that there aren't any important issues that we might just as technical staff be overlooking that are relevant to this community, especially in this case, since this is a very multimodal, it's a business corridor, there's a lot of tourists and there's a lot of students and sort of all kinds of travel and travel demand happening here. There's a lot of stakeholders that we want to make sure have the opportunity to weigh in on any changes that would affect them.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Member Bars.
Thank you, Vice Chair Siegel. Actually, similar kind of questions. So I believe that the Inner Sunset NTEP study is District 7, right? Rachel?
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. So, which is great. I'm happy to see this going forward in the district. And I would just like to understand, are there any high injury network corridors or intersections that are in the study area?
Lincoln Way. Yeah.
Oh, Lincoln, right, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got it. And is there's a quick build project that's underway already to address that part of Lincoln? Yeah.
There is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. There is?
There is a quick build. Yes. One of the things that Commissioner and Commissioner's office and I have discussed with MTA is, she has certainly heard that there remains community interest in asking what can be done above and beyond quick build. So MTA will be conducting a before and after study sort of in this time frame of this work, and we'll be able to make use of that information.
Okay, great, thank you. My other question is also though about time. So with respect to the previous item, we talked about the Vision Zero ramp funding. And I see that the final report for this would be go to the board for approval in June 2025. I believe as Vice Chair Siegel pointed out, these are all very dangerous intersections. We've had an unfortunate spate of fatalities at freeway touchdowns. So why would this take just, about 18 months to complete? And given the, frankly, urgency to address these intersections, and also like, is there going to be work that's done in parallel with this study?
I really appreciate that point. And so what I take away from that, I think we must conduct the work by that time frame in early 2025. But I will take back to the team sort of a challenge to advance the quick build, certainly portion of the investigation, because you're right. We compare that with the other work that MTA is doing on quick builds throughout the high injury network over the next year anyway. And I appreciate your feedback and would agree that there's a opportunity there that I will take back and talk with SFMTA about the quick build portion and how we can accelerate that.
Great, thank you.
Great. Member Ford, did you have another question or comment?
I hesitate to draw this out too much. But I'm hearing like quick build in one bucket and then other initiatives in other buckets. Is quick build a legal classification that's very specific to the interventions, or is like, what do you mean when you're saying there's a quick build response and there's a regular other response? Particularly for freeway ramps.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yes.
Yeah, well, so I do and also invite in and Mike, I'm not sure if someone from the quick build team or SFMTA would like to speak to their quick build program that they administer. And for the members reference, MTA provided a quick build update to our board, the SFCTA board, yesterday on their program. So it might be a useful overview of sort of what that program is and what it comprises. SFMTA does have a quick build toolkit of interventions that they apply throughout the high injury network. So there is a toolkit of those types of improvements, and they are focused on being, quick to implement, but also make a significant difference. The freeway on and off ramp are harder because we have to involve Caltrans and get Caltrans, the state, transportation agencies, approval for changes. So that's why there's another layer of complexity, and it's one of the reasons we're involved is because we have these, sort of facilitate that conversation with Caltrans and identifying and coming to agreement on the kinds of improvements. Caltrans is looking for how this affects their right of way and the things they're responsible for. So that's why there's an extra sort of an extra lens on this in this case, or an extra component to it. But that said, the quick build toolkit is a known package of strategies that MTA is deploying throughout the high injury network that, I do see the opportunity, and we can reflect back in this scope, the sort of two parallel efforts of deploying the quick build toolkit, but also looking beyond just the quick build toolkit and saying, where do we need or want to do more than the quick build toolkit, which might take further conversation with Caltrans or further technical justification and study and documentation to ensure their approval. I didn't want to speak over MTA as regards to their quick build program though. So if they would like to address that, I'd leave that to the chair.
Yeah, if there's anybody from MTA that would like to clarify what makes the quick build program unique, that would be great.
I can try. Hi, I'm Joel Goldberg, Manager of Programming and Grants with SFMTA. My team funds the quick builds, so it's great to hear these questions. In terms of what makes the quick builds work, I'm not the expert, but I also will say that when I do talk to the project managers and the capital program managers like Jamie, Damon, whomever, the idea is that they can do these projects on such a streamlined way that what might look like a temporary project can have permanent project benefits. And that they can use that if they work, even though they're not meant to last for many years, we can go back in and say, now we know what to do. Now we can make these permanent. If they don't work, take them away, no harm, no foul. So, I mean, that to me is the beauty of the quick builds. They pilot benefits. They can be basically done overnight or in a matter of just a couple of weeks. And they just don't have the complexity and the strings attached that we would find with some of our other projects that have, 15 to 25 year lives. And we learn from them, constantly learning from them. So we build on the knowledge we secure with the implementation of each of them over time.
Great, thank you so much, appreciate it. Not seeing any other comments or questions from members. I had one comment I wanted to pass along from, or I guess it's more of a question from Chair Ortiz about the tree planting program. Chair Ortiz was wanting to know how exactly the districts were prioritized and was concerned about where District 9 falls in that list of prioritized districts, and was concerned that the canopy in District 9 is pretty low relative to in many neighborhoods relative to a lot of the city. So I was wondering if someone could just expand a bit on how the districts were ranked, and when can other districts expect to see trees planted as well?
I believe we have someone from Public Works who is queued up and ready to go if you want to unmute yourself.
Sure, thank you. Nicholas Crawford. I am acting superintendent for the Bureau of Urban Forestry and Public Works. And we care a lot about trees naturally. The planting of trees and the prioritization of where we're doing our work has been a major theme for us. We're trying to do our best to plant trees where we need them the most. And we're looking at both low canopy areas, but also disadvantaged neighborhoods, parts of the city that are disproportionately impacted by heat and air quality issues, other factors like asthma, hospitalizations, and so on. So we have put a lot of thought into where we need to plant while still being present citywide. We have a neighborhood beautification day program that travels throughout the whole city. So we do plant in every district every year by design. We want to continue doing that. But as far as our major planting efforts, we're clustering those because we have to return to water them weekly for the next 3 years at least to establish them. And we want to put those routes together in a way that's really effective in minimizing travel time. So we've started with a couple of years ago, D11, and we did a huge planting project there with a lot of community support and changed the state of affairs there. They have a lot more trees, still need more. But we moved into D10 a couple of years ago and have been planting there and are continuing to water And we're looking now at the Tenderloin, specifically Soma Civic Center, that area, because that has 5 of the 5 lowest canopy census districts in the entire city. So that took some preparation. We think it's one of the most challenging parts of the city to plant, and we want to make sure that it's effective. So that's been driving our thought process. We've been planting in District 9 every year, and we will continue to do that as with all districts. But some of these larger planting projects have been driven by those other factors.
Great, thank you so much. Not seeing any more questions from members. Do we have public comment in the room on item 7?
Thank you. I may need a little extra time. 30 on the street trees, 3783 24th Street shows 4 trees. Actually, at that address, which is a laundry, there is a empty tree well with 3 adjacent trees towards Church Street. However, there's a parking meter also adjacent to that tree well. And then commuter buses, that's the front door, the first bus that goes there. And those 3 adjacent trees get usually hit by the buses as they come through. So that's a real issue. Across the street from this address, a tree fell on a Lexus during the summer storms. Now, the reason, my observation was that the tree was planted between the sidewalk and an underground utility vault box, preventing the tree roots from expanding outward because they were all compacted trying to go in this short distance. So there really needs to be some thought as to how these trees are planted. 15 years ago, the trees were planted in District 8, even over the objection of some seniors that said, I can't maintain these trees and clean up the leaves and the debris and all the other things. And DPW went and said, we're going to give you a tree whether you like it or not, or whether you can maintain it or not. Now we have leaves and debris on the sidewalks as a result of that. And also reported was the highest ratio of trees to residents in the city was District 8. And they continued to plant trees 15 years ago and went that route there. So, this program really needs to be evaluated and managed properly. Regarding the sunset, we talk about bold and innovative actions and stuff. My question is, in that bold area, are they going to reserve delivery spots on the internet so you can reserve a spot, make your delivery, as opposed to double parking and going on?
Thank you.
So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, not seeing any other public comment in the room. Is there remote public comment on item 7?
Checking for public comment, and there's no remote public comment for item 7.
Wonderful, thank you. Do I have a motion and a second to approve item 7?
Bars moves. Ford second.
Very good.
Great, moved by member Bars and seconded by member Ford. Can we take this same house, same call?
Objection?
Great,
Item 7 is approved.
great. That puts us on item 8, which is to adopt a motion of support to approve San Francisco's program of projects for the 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program with conditions, and this is an action item. And we have Nick Smith, Senior Transportation Planner, here to present this item.
Good evening, CAC members. My name is Nick Smith, Senior Transportation Planner with the Policy and Programming Division of the TA. And tonight, I'm here to give a presentation on our 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program recommendations. So what is RTIP? It is a 5-year investment plan for the state. It is administered by the California Transportation Commission, or CTC, and it's updated every 2 years. So the previous RTIP was adopted in 2022, and we're adopting, recommending new projects for 2024. And as the congestion management agency for San Francisco, the Transportation Authority recommends San Francisco's programs of projects. There's about $36 million available for programming this cycle, which is divided into 2 categories. First, there's about $1 million available for administering state grant programs and performing oversight on state-funded projects. These funds are split between the Transportation Authority and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC, in recognition of both the roles we play in administering projects. The remaining $35 million, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight, is available for capital projects. Of this amount, $21.2 million comes from San Francisco's new 2024 RTIP formula distribution. So that comes generally based on population. And in addition to that, 13.8 comes from 2018 RTIP funds that were allocated to SFCTA's train control upgrade project, phase 1 and 2, but those funds lapsed in March 2023 due to SFCTA's inability to meet timely use of funds deadlines. So those funds have now become available in this cycle to program. San Francisco and our board have long-standing RTIP priorities, which currently designate the Central Subway as the highest priority for fulfilling our commitment, followed by a previous MTC advance for the Presidio Parkway project, and finally the Portal or Caltrain Downtown Extension project. The reason these commitments exist is because the funds for both Central Subway and Presidio Parkway, RTIP funds could not be programmed directly to those projects. And that's because RTIP and CTC have strict contracting guidelines, and we'll be hearing more about that in the presentation. And for the portal, which is led by the Trans-Bay Joint Powers Authority, or TJPA, they're currently working on with the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, to submit their financial plan and request entry into engineering as part of their efforts to secure a more than $4 billion capital investment grant, or CIG. So to support this effort, we recommend that the board fulfill the RTIP priorities out of order and to fund the full portal commitment. Fulfilling this commitment will require a Prop L fund exchange because the project's large and complex progressive design build approach, again, does not easily comply with CTC RTIP guidelines for the same reasons that affected Central Subway and Presidio Parkway. And this fund exchange will be described later in the presentation. We have existing RTIP programming from previous cycles. As of the previous cycle in 2022, we have $8 million programmed from the 2020 RTIP to New Flyer Midlife Overhaul Phase 2, and we are proposing to leave that programming as is. And as well, we have $10.6 million from 2022 RTIP funds programmed to train control upgrade Phase 3, so different than the project I mentioned before, which was Phase 1 and 2. This is Phase 3 and Judah, and
those represent our currently programmed projects. But for the reasons I described previously, which involve CTC's contracting, procurement, and timely use of funds requirements that are very difficult to comply with on non-traditional design bid build projects, we are as part of this proactively recommending that the RTIP funds programmed to the train control project phase 3 be reprogrammed as part of this cycle to a different project that we'll get into to avoid the compliance issues and subsequent deprogramming that affected train control phase 1 and 2. So to get into our programming recommendations for this cycle, we, as mentioned before, we're recommending the portal be San Francisco's top RTIP priority this cycle because, as I mentioned, TJPA is working to secure a more than $4 billion CIG grant, and these funds will be part of that project's funding plan. Again, because the portal cannot accept RTIP funds directly due to its progressive design build contract, we're proposing a fund exchange that will enable the funding of the portal through 2024 RTIP funds. So that exchange would involve programming the full portal commitment of $17.8 million in RTIP funds to SFMTA's New Flyer Midlife Overhaul Phase 3 project, which is different from the New Flyer Phase 2 project that I mentioned previously and is currently programmed. This is the next phase of that program, Phase 3. And then an equal amount, so $17.8 million in local Prop L funds, which are pending programming to New Flyer Phase 3, would instead be programmed to the portal pending November approval of the Prop L Muni Maintenance 5-year prioritization plan by our board in November. So in that way, we could program the $17.8 million in RTIP funds, and the portal project would get $17.8 million, but those would be in Prop L funds coming from the New Flyer program. And importantly, we have discussed and received buy-in for this revision and fund exchange from both SFMTA and MTC. So what is this New Flyer Midlife Overhaul project, Phase 3, that is going to be taking these RTIP funds? It's a scheduled midlife overhaul of 140-foot and 60-foot electric trolley and motor coaches to be completed in December 2029. In all, as part of this RTIP cycle, we're recommending $45.6 million in new, lapsed, and reprogrammed RTIP funds be programmed to this project. In November, our board will consider the Prop L Muni Maintenance 5 YPP I mentioned, and that as well will include an additional $5.9 million in local Prop L match for this $45.6 million in RTIP funded scope, which, as I mentioned, will fund 100 vehicles. So in total, this RTIP scope of the New Flyer project we're talking about has a total project cost of $51.5 million. This RTIP scope is actually a piece of the even larger Phase 3 program, which will fund 218 vehicles. So this will fund 100 of that 218, and that larger Phase 3 program will be requesting a total of 37.5 million in Prop L funds. So 5.9 of that 37.5 is the match for this RTIP scope. And as well, maintenance data shows that rehab of the fleet significantly improves vehicle reliability, reduces incidents of breakdowns, and prevents service interruptions and costly repairs. The vehicles in Phase 3 that will be overhauled were procured between the years of 2018 to 2020. And again, completion is expected in December of 29. So this table shows what our commitments would look like if what we're proposing in the 2024 RTIP program of projects and the associated revision of priority and fund exchange are approved. So our DTX commitment would be fulfilled. Our central subway commitment would be reduced by $17.1 million. This 17.1 reduction is the share of funds on the new flyer project to DTX. And it's composed of both the new formula funds and those lapsed funds. So our remaining commitment on central subway would be going from 32.8 million as it stands now down to 15.7 million. And MTC's Presidio Parkway commitment would remain at 31 million. So our total remaining commitments would drop from 84.6 million to 46.7 million. And regarding the priority of the two remaining commitments of Presidio Parkway and Central Subway, they would, in the next RTIP cycle, which will be 2026, be both treated as first priority. And when that fund estimate is available for the 2026 RTIP cycle, which will happen in 2025, we'll work with both MTC and SFMTA to evaluate the funds available, readiness and urgency of proposed projects by each agency, and their RTIP project delivery track record when developing our 2026 RTIP program recommendations. As for next steps, after the board adopts San Francisco's 2024 RTIP program of projects and the revision to the order of our RTIP priorities, we will submit the program of projects and revised RTIP priorities to MTC by the November 1st deadline. We will bring the new flyer midlife overhaul phase 3 portal fund exchange and the muni maintenance 5YPP for approval. That approval of this program of projects is conditioned on to the board on November 14th. The MTC Commission is expected to consider the 2024 RTIP item and revised RTIP priorities on December 20th. And then the CTC will consider adopting the 2024 RTIP at its March 21st, 2024 meeting. And if approved, SFMTA would be able to allocate the funds for the new flyer midlife overhaul phase 3 project in fiscal year 27-28. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the presentation. We'll take questions from members now. Member Ortega.
Hi, thank you. I just want to preface this, if some of these questions could be better answered in an email, you can let me know. So the first thing I was just curious about is you mentioned that we had $13 million lapse due to not having a timely use of funds. And I think I'm just a little curious why that lapse occurred. It wasn't particularly clear to me at the time, and I just want to get a little bit of a better understanding of where $13 million is appearing magically. I mean, yeah.
Again, Joel Goldberg, Manager of Programming and Grants. That wasn't a good moment. We were hoping to get those funds allocated just like it would a Prop L, Prop K allocation in almost a year ago in 2023. The project is exceedingly complex and has a very long timeline. And we learned, whatever doesn't kill you makes you strong. We learned that transit projects of this complexity really don't fit the STIP program very well. And in hindsight being 2020, okay, no more cliches, but we probably should have considered this years ago when the funds were programmed in the STIP in the first place. So when we went through the allocation process, we did not have NEPA federal environmental clearance, and that wasn't going to come for some time. And, rather than try to shoehorn this very expensive, complicated project into a $13 million funding request. We tried every option available with CTC staff and Caltrans. We talked with our partners here at the TA. And we just said, we can't advance this. We won't be allowed to get the funds allocated to the project without national, without NEPA clearance. And so unfortunately, we had to relinquish the funds. And that's the bad news. The good news is they do come back to the TA to reprogram. They're doing, they're taking that first step with you tonight. And it was frankly a somewhat bitter pill because it's not something we're in the business of doing, is letting funds lapse. But absolutely a lesson learned. And with the midlife overhauls that you're taking a look at tonight, far simpler project. It's one step less than procuring a vehicle. You're overhauling X vehicles over a certain amount of time. Phase 1 of the program's underway. Phase 2 is just a few years away. And phase 3 comes on the heels of phase 2. It's just far cleaner. And I would never recommend putting STIP funds on a complex project like our train control program again. So a lot of lessons learned for us.
Thank you so much. That definitely helps clarify my confusion. I just, like I said, I've been on the board for about a year, so I've missed some of the updates. Next, I think that you started answering this, and I would just love to understand a little more. It sounds like there's a lot of financial magic happening to get funds out of the MTC, is it? Into the CTA and the SFMTA, especially for what I would call the extremely complex project, the Portal project, which, side note, the Caltrain electrification fair was last Saturday, and I went, and I'm super excited for the Portal project. I think this is going to be amazing. So obviously, I'm happy we're going to try to get more funds and put that as like a priority one to secure federal funding. But I don't understand the complexities, I think, and I would love a layman's understanding of why all of this movement of money around through, I think you said it was like almost like a bargain, like SFMTA is gonna give you money for something else, and I got a little lost, and I would love a really simple understanding of why the money seems to be moving through like 4 organizations.
I love financial magic. That is a good one. We call it financial engineering, but financial magic works just fine. That is making funding sources line up to particular projects, types of projects, uses of projects, schedules of projects. There are a lot of limitations and opportunities that go along with various different funding sources. Different colors of money have different restrictions and uses tied to them. The STIP funds in particular, you can't do anything until the funds are allocated by CTC. So you can't advertise your contract, you can't get going on any aspect of your work without jumping through some hurdles that I won't even go into that are not guaranteed to even be able to get that permission to spend earlier. The way that we have worked around things like this is by looking to other projects that can absorb STIP funds in this situation, in this case, projects that have flexible local funds to free up for other uses. When the funds were first available, these STIP funds were first available when we were first coming up with our priorities back in 2005. The reason that we're not able to put the money directly onto those projects, those were priorities regardless. The reason that we couldn't put the funds directly onto the projects is because Central Subway's done, right? I mean, by the time it's a very variable funding source, it's not like a straight idea of how much money you will get each cycle. It can be very high, it can be very low. And so we have always been approaching meeting our commitments by programming funds to other projects of MTAs, in this case, for Central Subway priority. For MTC, it'll likely be going on to express lanes. So a project of these agencies' choices, and that's how we're meeting those commitments. So that's one aspect of financial magic. Another aspect of financial magic is figuring out how to get a local flexible funding source, ideally. That's the gold, right? Of what you could possibly do onto a project, in this case, as soon as possible. For DTO. Sort of just talking at this point, but I guess it's, yeah, I'll let Maria.
If I just do super simplify, because this is brain damaging for all. But this is Anna's, but this one that we're talking about is a dollar for dollar exchange. So there's no financial impact on either project. We're just making sure that projects match the rules of the program. There are all kinds of variations on that. But that's what this is.
So basically, I'm just gonna repeat it back, so everyone kind of gets this understanding. That this particular funding source has very strict requirements. And projects, especially the new sort of projects that are complex or things that have a lot of variables, don't really match those requirements for funding necessarily. So there's other funding sources that are local or flexible where they might actually match this particular funding source. So we're basically going to shuffle the money around so that this now funds the other stuff, and then the other stuff can then fund the hairy, complex things, which I gotta say for a project, again, definitely goes into that. I saw the map finally, and it was like, you're gonna tunnel under the most expensive real estate in the world. I was like, I'm here for it. I want to see it. Very excited. So, okay, it's basically that we need to fund certain projects, and this is an alternate way for us to fund other project commitments that fit the guidelines.
Yeah, exactly. And the other factor, just to keep it simple, is just taking the contracting rule. The state money isn't, or state money isn't always available when the project's ready to go. So if your project has steam and you don't want to wait, or you can't accurately predict, I'm going to need it here and I can wait for the state, then you might be better off with a different fund source. So what Joe was saying is that the mid-flyer project is more controllable. It's more straightforward, sort of turnkey like. So we have more confidence, but I'm not going to lie to you. We are nervous putting this much money on one project. And Joel's gonna be our BFF, because we are gonna make sure that we see all the rules coming up, that everything's going smoothly. Because with the state, they don't like to give you, they don't have the flexibility, or don't want to have the flexibility to give you extensions like we can do locally with our own money. So we will be coming back to you with this project.
Thank you.
Great. Member Kim.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested in the PCDO Parkway project, but probably I didn't get it before. Probably this is before my join. So is there any I can get information or document?
Yes, definitely. And this was the project had an update in front of our board last week or in September. So we can definitely share those materials with you. It gives a very up-to-date status of the governance discussions about where the project is in the Federal Transit Administration's pipeline for securing funding, and the status of the work. So we can certainly share that with you. And I think Jesse was here at the beginning of September.
I remember Kim was asking about Presidio Parkway, not
Presidio Park, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were sorry. Oh, that's done. Sorry. Presidio Parkway? Yes, this is, oh my gosh, sorry. Presidio Parkway, this was a cash infusion that was required as we were closing the public-private partnership arrangement or agreement that Caltrans and SFCTA were using as a tool to implement the second phase of the project. And so this was, it was literally it was what was required to quote seal the deal on the public-private partnership financial arrangement for the milestone payments. So, and we agreed in order for MTC to provide federal funding we agreed to repay that loan with our future shares of the state sources.
I remember Kim, in case anyone listening doesn't know either, but the Presidio Parkway is the southern approach to the Golden Gate Bridge that goes through the Presidio Chaucer Park. It used to be called Doyle Drive.
Right, so this is done. Yeah,
It's done.
yeah. That's my understanding, but I thought I missed something,
No.
but I know the
I missed
project, yeah.
something.
yeah,
I'm sorry,
got it.
yeah.
Great, member Bars.
Thank you, and I just want to commend Member Ortega on her questioning and staff for your really helpful responses. I had 2 questions, now I have 1, but I was prepared to ask you to explain the swap to me like I was 5. So thank you for saving that. I really appreciate that explanation. My second question is, I don't know if you've had this kind of question before. So this is for the RTIP, right? Which gets bundled up to the CTC ultimately for approval, right? And I'm just curious, of all the RTIPs that all the counties in San Francisco are preparing now, do we have a sense of what percentage of capital dollars are going towards highway projects as opposed to transit or other projects?
To like Anna answers or Nick more probably, but I can say part of the reason we're jumping through hoops is this program was set up to fund highway projects.
Yes.
We in the past, I don't know what the current cycle had any exception. Everybody else roadway, and we had transit projects.
Got it. Source of the complexity, it sounds. Okay, yeah.
But of course, now CTC is wanting to fund transit projects. And so the guidelines haven't caught up to their desire to expand the program quite yet.
Interesting, but do we, I would like to understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with in like, what is it, August? It's going for, in August 24, it's going for approval? I did read the memo, I just don't remember.
It will be at CTC in March. It goes to NTC first in December. Am I getting these dates right?
Yeah, as December for MTC, then March for CTC.
Is there a measure of the magnitude of how this is shaping up? Like I think this is a theme, if you haven't sensed that. I'm very interested in like the magnitude of our public investments over time.
Yeah, not off the top of my head, but we did actually go and look at, what like Alameda County is funding, because we wanted to fund projects and it's all roadway projects. So I think we could look at what kind of magnitude, but it was set up as basically a highway program. Yeah, and I will point out that in advance of the guidelines every cycle, CTC releases them. There's a chance for input. So MTC did provide input, that this fund source is restricted, and of course, next cycle they will provide similar feedback. So hopefully the program will evolve.
Okay.
Member Ortega.
Okay, I have one more question. Just because I think this is showing some things I don't understand. So curiously, adding on to Member Bars's question here, I know that highways are technically federal, or that's my understanding. I could be wrong, but I always thought of them as federal roadways. And is it administered by the state and that's a wrong interpretation? Or is it that the state administers them for the federal government? Or is it that I just grew outside of Washington, DC, and Washington, DC was always federal, so everything got all screwed up, and that's why my understanding is wrong? Anyone?
I should take you out to lunch or maybe a bar if we're allowed. The most of probably, I'm just gonna guess here, probably every highway, whether it's a state highway or a federal highway, probably has federal money in it. This program is a slush bucket of various colors of money.
Okay. Great. Cool.
Great, thank you. I appreciate all of the explanations from staff. I had to get a similar explanation earlier this week, so I appreciate that. I guess have a really quick question about, given that, So first, do lapsed funds always return to us in a subsequent cycle if they are for some reason not used in a timely manner?
Yes, correct.
But they come back in the last year, for sure. I mean, they're already late in the cycle when they're new, but they're definitely late if they're lapsed.
I know that the mid-life overhaul of the new flyers, that program, like we've done phases of that before, or phases are already in progress. Is this, we have a high degree of confidence about this? Is this just like an option we can quickly exercise with the manufacturer? Do we do the overhaul in-house? Like, what gives us the control and confidence over this program?
It's Joel Goldberg again. It's a bit of learning by doing. So based on the phase 1 work that's been done, we are pretty confident that we can award a contract for phase 2. And that's going to be for the motor coaches, not the electrics. And that should line up with when we're asking for this nefarious STIP funding. And then phase 3, the timing would be just about congruent with when we can ask for the phase 3 funding. So there would be a contract for phase 2 and a contract for phase 3. And what Maria said is really one of our concerns. We can't get ahead of the allocation with the contracting process. So we did have a discussion with our director of transit, Julie Kirschbaum, about the procurement of phase 3 and lining it up with the STIP timing, and she's okay with that. Not that we ever want to see funds lapse again, but we do have a little bit of a year or two, a full fiscal year ahead of us to see how things are playing out before we get to FY25. It's another crazy thing about the STIP is once you get into the year, you're supposed to get the funds, you're locked. It's you get it allocated or they lapse. But at least the year beforehand, this current fiscal year, I mean, not that we don't want anything to change, but you have a little bit more flexibility. But it's, did I say nefarious already? I'll just leave it. It's a really complicated program. So, I totally appreciate your questions and, hearing my colleagues explain these things and me trying to explain these things. I'm going to say that my buddy here, Nick, and I probably put, well, he more than I, probably 100 hours just into this little thought process. So yeah, there's a lot of nuances to it, and hopefully this will all work out with us getting money for our midlives without a whole lot of pain.
And we also have the project manager, Gary. If you're able to just answer the question about whether the work is done in-house or contracted.
Yes, hi, this is Gary Chang with the SFMTA. Thanks for having me here. So the work in the phase 3 will be contracting out. And as Joe Gilbert had mentioned that, yes, there were a lot of lessons learned from the phase 1 there. Originally, we had programmed it to be doing like a really full-blown overhaul, doing tons of standardizations. But what we learned from that process was it's a very costly process. And then at the same time, it was a very complexity because just think about having something, it's just not talking about putting in the equipment onto the vehicle, but then at the same time, it may not have enough spacings and you just got to reshuffle everything around. So that was quite a lessons learned from us. And since then, we have simplified the scope of work. Basically, it will be component replacing like to simplify it. So as Joe Goldberg mentioned it, yeah, we feel really confident that we should be able to execute the contract as per we suggested it in the scope of work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate it. I also just wanted to quickly express appreciation that SMTA is taking the time and investing the funds to do the midlife overhaul at all. I know that's not like a super shiny project, but I think I don't know. I love the new flyers, and they seem to me to be noticeably more reliable than the fleet that they replaced, and they generally are clean and they look nice on the outside. I don't like when I ride the bus here in San Francisco compared with in other cities, I often feel like an afterthought riding the bus, and I never feel that way here, and I'm glad to see us continuing to invest in them, and I hope to see their life be as long as possible, so thank you. Do we have any other questions from members? Seeing none, do we have any public comment in the room on item 8? Not seeing any. Do we have any remote public comment?
Yes, we have one remote public comment. Go ahead, Roland, your time starts now. Oh, you need help unmuting? Let's see here.
Thank you. That works much better.
Okay.
Yeah, I know you think I'm on my phone, but that's really my mic anyway.
No worries.
So the first thing, it's about the portal. So the first thing I'd like to point out is that where I come from, there is a subtle difference between non-invasive and open urban heart surgery, especially when there is a high likelihood that the patient may not survive the procedure. So my recommendation moving forward is that we add a condition that the TJPA completely remove the 4th and 1000th station from the scope of the PDB contract. And the reason why is that station should never have been on the Townsend. Should have been on 7th Street, specifically to eliminate the massive impacts of this portal thing, not only to the rail yards, but to the Muni operations on Townsend, including the brand spanking new Central Subway. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland, for your comment. And there's no further public comment for this item. Remote public comment.
Great, thank you. I have a motion to approve item 8.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by member Levine and seconded by member Ortega. I believe we can take the same house, same call, if there's no objection.
Item 8 is approved.
Great, that puts us on item 9, which is the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency paratransit fleet electrification update, and this is an information item. Jonathan Ruers, SFMTA's Chief Strategy Officer, is joining us remotely to present this update.
Chair, if Jonathan is delayed and we've got Bonnie here to step in.
Oh, okay, great.
Hi, everyone. Hi, good evening, Vice Chair Siegel, members of the committee. My name is Bonnie Jean Von Crow, and I'm the Public Affairs Manager for the SFMTA's Building Progress Program. I am speaking as Jonathan is, I believe, still on a flight. We're just getting off one. Should I share my screen, or will SFCTA staff be doing that? I can share. Okay, let me.
Yeah, whatever your preference.
Sure, let me do that. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm here to talk to you tonight about our paratransit fleet electrification planning process. And for those of us who may be unfamiliar with our paratransit fleet, it is a van and taxi program for people who are unable to independently use public transit because of a disability. The SFMTA has been running paratransit for 40 plus years, and it is a door-to-door program. So unlike our Muni service, which operates on fixed routes, paratransit picks people up at their doors and drops them off at their destination doors. So it's a door-to-door program. So we're here tonight specifically as part of our Prop K funding allocation, which provides for updates to the SFCTA board. Tonight, we're doing the update on our transition of the paratransit fleet and our planning process to make that a zero emissions fleet. But updates will continue to be ongoing to the SFCTA. And so the changeover from our paratransit fleet to zero emissions is part of our overall Building Progress program, which is a $2+ billion planning and capital program that both modernizes the SFMTA's aging facilities and also electrifies them. So has both dual goals. The paratransit electrification is not a standalone project. So it is part of our overall electrification program. You see a number of SFMTA facilities listed on the left side of the screen. Those are all part of the program to electrify our facilities, and many of these are, older facilities that the SFMTA is dealing with as part of this program. Overall, the objective of our paratransit service is to, reliably and safely transport people with disabilities, seniors to their destinations. And we certainly want to reduce vehicle emissions by transitioning to a zero emissions fleet. The last Prop K procurement allowed us to replace 17 gas-powered vans with gas-powered vans. We've done that in the last the current fiscal year. And then it also allows us for the purchase of one electric van to help us support testing for preparations for the transition to 100% zero emissions paratransit fleet. The current paratransit fleet includes 132 vehicles. So that's both the 111 cutaway vans, like you see in the picture there. And then we also have 21 just regular minivan style vehicles. And those, the lifespans of our paratransit vehicles are 5 years and 4 years respectively. So when we think about complying with regulations for electrification, we're looking at the California Air Resources Board, their innovative clean transit, the ICT regulation. And the ICT regulation really works on gross vehicle weight. So gross vehicle weight greater than 14,000 pounds, those vehicles are regulated by ICT. For paratransit fleet, that includes the 68 vehicles that we have, which are our Ford E450s. And those are our larger vans. We use them for our group van service when we take groups to senior centers or adult day healthcare, things like that. So those are regulated under ICT. And then there are other regulations, newer ones, the Advanced Clean Fleet, the ACF regulation that was just approved in April, that may, some of our other vehicles may come under that. That's still going through the process. But overall, we are looking at transitioning our entire paratransit fleet to electric vehicles. Oops, I think I went the wrong way. So this past year, the SFMTA has been evaluating various vehicles for electric vehicles. So we've looked at both the Turtle Top and the Ford EV. The bottom line for both of those vehicles was that the vehicles sit too low on the road. And so they're actually scraping on San Francisco's hills. Because remember, as these vehicles are designed with a sort of looking at nationwide needs, San Francisco has a pretty unique use case with our hilly terrain and the demand that we put on our vehicles. So we've deemed both of those sits too low on the road. We are looking forward to evaluating the Lightning ZEV3. We're hoping that vehicle, we get that in the next 1 or 2 months to be able to evaluate that. In terms of the lifetime for these vehicles, electric vehicles, it's typically 5 years. That's the lifetime for the electric paratransit vehicles. And we are looking at, in the next phase, evaluating sort of battery power and performance in the next phase of our testing. Some of the risks when we look at transitioning paratransit to all electric are operational viability. I mean, right now, there just simply isn't, we haven't identified a vehicle that works in San Francisco's terrain. And then also price per vehicle. The vehicles that we're testing today, they're really built as gas-powered vehicles, and then they're converted to electric after the fact. And so we are looking to some of the newer things, like Ford is developing an electric paratransit vehicle from the ground up, and we're hoping that some of those advancements lower the per vehicle costs. The SFMTA completed its battery electric bus facilities master plan in February 2022. We learned a number of things in that plan, including power needs for all of our facilities, looking at scheduling and what that would take, and then sequencing, right? Because as we transition our facilities to electric, we have to sequence that amongst our overall portfolio facilities, but also looking at sequencing and aligning it with our fleet procurement. And that includes our paratransit fleet procurement. Right now, our paratransit fleet is housed at a number of facilities in Brisbane. So they are outside of the facility, or of the city. Those are leased facilities. And so we are looking at moving paratransit to an SFMTA-owned facility. So we're looking at a number of existing facilities to move that fleet. So it's not so much designating a new site, but really working within MTA's existing sites. We have a number of projects within the Building Progress Program where we are looking to update our existing yards. And so taking a look at those and how we can incorporate paratransit into those existing yards is something that we're doing right now, looking for a permanent facility. But it's a significant lift. I mean, SFMTA has a number of very old facilities. Both our Potrero and Presidio yards are over 100 years old. And so, looking at, in order to have a fully electric fleet, right, we need to be able to charge that fleet. So that means both on and off-site infrastructure, like clearly the charging infrastructure at our facilities, but also off-site infrastructure, like, trenching to existing substations. Other things that we're working within is looking at PG&E capacity and the timing for working with PG&E at all of our facilities, and then the power and load requirements of each facility as it would be a transition to a fully electric facility. And then, of course, funding. Funding is also a challenge, and we are aggressively pursuing funding. We're happy to report the SFMTA was successful in securing approximately $30 million from the FTA for pilot charging infrastructure projects at the Woods Yard and the Islayas Creek yards for battery electric buses. And we're continuing to pursue both FTA bus and bus facilities grants and the low-no emissions vehicle grants as well. And as well as looking at other funding sources like GEO bond programs. The SFMTA is slated in the capital planning process, the 10-year capital plan for a GEO bond in November of 2026 is when we're up again. In terms of the critical path and next steps, so we are currently in phase 1, which is over the next 18 months. So really doing the facility design guidelines for paratransit. Like I said, we're in the midst of doing that location analysis of where that paratransit fleet could be placed within our existing facilities and aligning it with our modernization and electrification program, as well as looking at fleet procurement and sequencing of those facilities, and then develop a funding strategy around it. In the phase 2, which is the 3 to 5 year span, we'll be finalizing a number of those specifications and the analyses that are done in phase 1. I should have said also in phase 1, we are hiring a consultant to do a market study and cost analysis as well to help us in phase 2. So phase 2, when we've identified funding gaps, really looking to identify them and finding ways to plug those gaps with the funding. By the end of phase 2, we do anticipate having those pilot programs for the facility upgrades done. And so that would be able to charge up to 20% of our battery electric fleet, based on the fleet replacement schedule. And then phase 3, that's longer term, 10, 15-year time span in terms of looking at constructing infrastructure at a number of permanent facilities, of which paratransit would go at. We're still finding the exact location, but we are looking at a number of facilities in our modernization and electrification programs, and then having that power, chargers, load requirements to be able to charge a fully electric fleet, both for battery electric buses and for our paratransit fleet. And we will be coming back to the SFCTA with a report on that comprehensive facilities capital program, our overall building progress program, when we come for for Prop L funding. So we will be back to talk to you all about that overall effort and not just paratransit like we're here. So I'm happy to take any questions, and we do have other members of the team here to answer questions as needed. And I will I'll pause sharing for now.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Member Bars.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I would just like to commend staff on the testing approach. I think I'm really happy to hear that you're testing individual vehicles and coming up with sort of an assessment of each before doing a procurement for a lot of new vehicles. So, thank you. Thank you for applying that due diligence. I have actually maybe pretty simple question, I hope. How many rides or maybe person rides does the paratransit program offer a month or a year?
That's a great question. So I don't know, Virginia, if you're on the line, I have Virginia Radke from our accessible services team. And I'm not sure if Virginia, if you can answer that question specifically about the service for paratransit.
I don't have that information now, but I can get it and bring it back.
Yeah, so we can get back to you on that.
That would be great. Thank you.
We have any other questions from members? I was just wondering real quick, why are both the new vehicles and the current vehicles, why do they have such a short useful lifetime compared to the rest of our bus fleet? Is that just the nature of paratransit vehicles generally?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna let Gary Chang from our fleet team answer that one. He's the expert.
Hi, Gary Chang with SFMTA again. So typically for any manufacturers, they are actually being certified by the FTA regulations. So most of the cutaway van, they are certified for 5 years. And then for the vans, let's say the minivans per se, those are rated for 4. So there's actually a stipulations coming from federal transit FTA guideline. And then for our revenue service vehicles, those are rated for 12 years. And majority reason, I think most critical reason is the structural stability of it. And then the cost to produce, it also plays a big factor as well. Regular hybrid vehicles, you will be looking at right now, it's over $1 million versus a cutaway van, you'll be looking at about 150. So.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions from members. Do we have any public comment on item 9 in the room? Not seeing any. Do we have any remote public comment on item 9?
No, we do not.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. It puts us on item 10, which is the introduction of new business. Do any CAC members have any new business? Not seeing any. We still need to take, okay, great. All right, well then we can move on to item 11, which is public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment? General public comment? No. Great. Operator, is there any remote public comment?
Not seeing any remote public comment for this item.
Wonderful, then that means we can move on to item 12, which is adjournment. Thank you.
You have to hit
all
me
for
down.
your- Oh, thank you all for your time. The meeting is now adjourned.